Hey guys, and welcome to a brand new tutorial series on Raspberry Pi. Now I'm super excited because I just got the brand new B+ Raspberry Pi, or at least brand new to me. And what I'm going to be doing through these next videos is showing you guys how to use this Raspberry Pi, write some cool, awesome Python programs with it that will allow us to interact with the outside world. So for those of you that don't know, this Raspberry Pi has something called GPIO pins. Let's see if I can get zoomed in on here, on the side right here. And these essentially allow you from code to have voltage going in or out of them. They also allow you to connect sensors and cameras and all that kind of fun stuff. So what I'm going to be doing throughout this series is starting off really basic with just how to trigger like an LED, which is what we're going to be doing in this video, and then moving into more complex stuff like the Raspberry Pi camera module, which I actually have in here. And then we're going to go into like a little security system, which I'm actually building as we speak. So anyways, I hope you guys are excited for this series. If you have any ideas on what you'd like to see with the Raspberry Pi, please leave a comment down below. With that being said, let me reset up the camera and I'm going to show you guys how we can set up our first circuit on a breadboard using the Raspberry Pi. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So from this point on, we're going to need a few things. Now the first thing I'm going to assume is that you guys first of all have this Raspberry Pi and you've at least opened it up out of the box and maybe looked at it and played with it a little bit. I'm also going to assume that you've installed the operating system onto this. So this little SD card here at the bottom, you guys can kind of see it there. I'm assuming you've kind of played with that and assumed how to get that on. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and do that before following this tutorial. Now the next thing we're going to need is we're going to need a breadboard, and we're going to need some of these jumper cables. So I actually have two types of cables. I have what's known as a female, I think you guys can see that there, two male cables. So this has a prong and no prong, and this is going to allow us to put this on some of these GPIO pins. We also have male-to-male jumper wires, which are what we're going to use for the breadboard mainly. And you can see that they have two prongs. I know it's kind of blurry the way the camera is, but hopefully you get the point there. So make sure you guys pick those up. You can buy them at any kind of electronics store, or you can just get them off Amazon. I'll leave some links in the description down below. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to start hooking up this Raspberry Pi to the breadboard, so that when we eventually turn it on and start programming, we don't have to do anything. We can actually just work directly with the code. Now, it's very important that you do this while your Raspberry Pi is off. If you do this while your Raspberry Pi is on, you have a very high chance of shorting it, which is not good. In most cases, when you short your Raspberry Pi, what's happening is essentially you're putting voltage into one of the ground pins, or a pin that's not expecting that much voltage, which means the whole board gets a ton of voltage on it and then it just shuts off. Now in some cases you can actually fry your board. Raspberry Pi tries to avoid this by going into recovery mode, but just you don't want to be in that situation, so please turn this off before you start working with any of the pins. Now we are going to talk about these GPIO pins. So you guys can see them here, and what we're going to be doing is working with the pins on the bottom right side here, so right where that Raspberry Pi icon is. And to clarify here, I'm using the Raspberry Pi model B+, which has 40 GPIO pins. So the pins that we're going to be using, I'm trying not to get too close to the camera here, are going to be on this side. So we're actually going to hook up our first wire, and we're going to hook up the female side to this top right pin, or sorry, bottom right pin, which is going to be the 5-volt pin. Now this is just always 5 volts going through it, so obviously be careful if this is on, because it's going to be a live wire that has 5 volts going through it. Now the next cable we're going to hook up, I'm going to hook up this black one, is going to be 2 pins to the left of that. And this is what's known as our ground pin. So let me get it in and then I'll show you guys. So right there you can see that we have 1 space and 2 cables like that. Now what we need essentially whenever we're creating a circuit is we need some kind of power, which is going to come out of this, and then we need some kind of ground. Now the ground is going to be what completes the circuit. So if you guys don't know anything about electricity, essentially you need the circuit to be complete like that for anything to actually happen. Otherwise it just doesn't work. So once we've done that, now we're actually going to hook these up to our breadboard. Now if you look at the breadboard here, you'll see that we have what's known as a positive rail and a negative rail. So right there, positive and negative. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug in our positive wire, which is actually going to be the live wire, which the voltage is going into any slot on this red rail. The way that this red rail works is when you plug something into here, there's a metal strip underneath it that attaches to all of these other holes. So essentially, anytime we plug another jumper wire into this red hole, if this is giving us voltage, then it's going to get voltage from that as well. Now for ground, we're going to do the same thing, except we're going to plug it into any one on the negative rail right here. Now I'm just going to plug them in beside each other, but notice that since this line goes here, you can tell that this is a rail, which means the whole thing is going to be charged from any two wires going like this. Now, the way the breadboard works, other than that, is you see the rows like this. So, for example, if you look at like row 10, which is right here, you can see that what's actually, how this works essentially is if you plug something into that pin, all of the other pins in that row will get the charge from that. You guys might not understand this right now, but as we start playing with the breadboard, you'll understand. Essentially, the rails go like that, and the rows go like that, but do not go past this dividing line here. So you can almost think this is like two little breadboards, where this is one breadboard, and this is the other, and they're attached by this kind of divider. So something you plug in here is not going to be charged on this side, and you guys will understand that as we go through. So now that we've done that, we've plugged into the positive and negative rail. What we're actually going to do is we're going to use this male-to-male jumper wires, and we're going to hook them up on these rails. So just plug one cable in anywhere on the negative rail, and another cable in anywhere on the positive rail. Now we're going to use these to connect to our LEDs, which I'm going to grab in just a second, as well as a resistor. So the next thing we're going to need is a resistor, and I'll be back in 1 second with those. Alright, so I've got one of these LEDs now here. You can see this little green LED. It's not really focusing too well. And what we're going to do now is we're going to plug this into the breadboard, and then we're going to plug in these male jumper wires to connect to it, as well as one of these resistors. Now, the reason we're using a resistor is because these LEDs don't actually use enough voltage to absorb enough voltage so you don't short your board. So essentially what happens in a circuit is you need to have something using the voltage. So in this case, our LED is going to use the voltage and create some kind of light and transform essentially those electrons and that energy into a source of heat, which will be this light, okay? Now, I know this sounds like really sciencey. It's not that complicated, but essentially all I'm saying here is this does not transform enough energy, which means that when we pass through this LED, too much current is going to be coming out of the LED into our Raspberry Pi here, which means that it could possibly short. So to be safe, we're going to use a resistor. Now, the resistor that I'm using is 100 ohms. Now, you don't really need to know what the ohms means, but that's just the amount of resistance. So just try to get one that's at least 50 ohms and use that. Now, you can try to use it without a resistor and just see what happens. Worst case, your board might turn off, but I don't think anything will actually happen to it like too dangerous. Again, don't take my word for that, but I've used it without a resistor and it works. Just to be safe though, I like to recommend to people to use a resistor like this. So what we're going to do now is just start setting some things up on our breadboard. So I'm going to move my Raspberry Pi and zoom in a little bit here just so we can see this a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set up my resistor so it goes into this negative rail. So you can see that I'm actually plugging that in on that negative rail so it lines up with that blue wire here, which is going to be plugged in somewhere else, and you guys will see where that is. So actually, we can remove this blue wire. My mistake, guys. We're going to get rid of that blue wire and just leave the green. Now, what I'm going to do is plug in this resistor just anywhere else on the board, close enough to it that it obviously fits. So you can see I've just decided to plug that in row 21, but just make sure that it goes in the holes and it fits like that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to use our LED. Now, the LED has two, little sides on it. So one of them you can see, it's not really focusing here. See if I can get that to focus, is shorter than the other. So that shorter side is actually going to be, I'll show you here again, is actually going to be what ends up getting the positive side or the ground, and this longer side is what's going to be getting the voltage for us. So what we want to do is we want to plug in so that this shorter side is in line with the resistor, and this longer side, and you can just bend it a little bit, goes in anywhere else on the breadboard. So you can see here now, and I'll bring it up nice and close. Hopefully it focuses for us. We go like that. Maybe we can kind of see it. That we're lined up directly with the resistor, so that green LED is lined up with the short side with the resistor, and the long pin is just plugged into one of these other holes. What we're going to do next is we're going to take the jumper wire here, so this male to male, and we're going to plug it in so it lines up in the same row as the positive side, or the negative side, sorry, of our LED. Actually, it is positive side because it's going to be getting the voltage. So you can see this green one is lined up on this rail here, which gets voltage. We're going to go in here. It's going to light up the LED. It's going to come out, go into the resistor, and then go into this orange cable here, or sorry, not orange, this black cable here, which is plugged in to our Raspberry Pi on those GPIO pins. So now that we've done that, we can actually go ahead and turn the Raspberry Pi on, and we should see that our LED is lighting up. So let's go ahead and do that, and I will be right back. All right, so I've plugged my Raspberry Pi in, and you can see that our LED is actually lighting up there. So if you've done that correctly, your LED should be lighting up, and you should see a little red light on your Raspberry Pi, maybe a green light if it's just booting up. So that's because we're getting constant power from that 5-volt pin, so we've been able to turn on this LED. So now what I'm going to show you guys how to do is how we can do this from code. So all we actually need to do to modify this is we're first going to unplug our Raspberry Pi. I usually would recommend you shut it off before you do that, but I'm just kind of living on the wild side and unplugging it. And now what we're going to do is move actually the pin that's giving us our voltage, so this 5-volt pin, we're going to move it to a different pin, which is known as a GPIO pin, which will allow us to control this from code. So what I'm going to do now is simply take out this one from that back right 5-volt pin, and what I'm going to do is move it over so it's up on this top row 4 pins over, and I'll zoom in on this in a second for you guys. So you should be able to see now, if I can focus it, focus, maybe, that it's 4 pins to the left at the top. So if you look where that ground pin is, 1 up and to the left, and that's what's known as our GPIO pin number 4. So now what I'm going to do is actually hook up to the Raspberry Pi on the computer and show you guys how we can program to use this pin to turn off our LED from code. So let's go ahead and do that now. Alright, so I've booted up my Raspberry Pi, I'm on the desktop, and what I'm going to do now is show you how we can actually use this little circuit we set up to turn on and off the green LED. Now what I just realized is that these GPIO pins and the one that we connected to give out 3.3 volts, which is pretty low and doesn't result in much of a light for our LED. So if you want, what you guys can do is what I've done and just disconnect the resistor. I don't know if you guys can see this at all or not. And what I've done is just directly hook up the LED in the circuit. So that's actually a bit of a challenge for you guys. See if you can remove the resistor and still get this to work. Now, if you can't put the resistor back in the way you had it, you will still see the light up. It just won't be as bright. So you can remove the resistor. This will be safe to do. I've just tested it myself. There's no issues. So what I'm going to do is open up IDLE from here, from our Raspberry Pi, and we're just going to work in the console, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do this. So we're going to say from, and this is just a few lines of code here, GPIO 0, if I can spell 0 correctly, import, and in this case, LED. Now that we've done this, we're going to define what GPIO pin we're using to turn on the LED by just saying green, which is going to be the name of our LED. We're going to say is equal to LED, and then here we're going to put 4. Now, just 4, like that. Now, once you do that, now we can actually use the variable name green to turn our LED on and off by simply typing .on and .off. So right now, hopefully you guys can see this. I'll just have it hovering. My LED is off. Now, if I put and I hit enter here, you can see that my LED turns on. Now, if I want to turn it off, if I go on the screen and I just go off like that and hit enter, you can see that the LED turns off, and I can continue to just turn it on and off from code like this. Now, obviously, you guys can write this in whatever kind of Python code you want, but that's as easy as it is to turn on and off the LED from a GPIO pin. If you're having any issues with this, chances are you've probably hooked up your board incorrectly, or you're, not typing this, or you're defining the wrong GPIO pin. So go back, watch, make sure you've hooked up everything correctly. And again, a little challenge for you guys, try to remove this resistor and see if you can get everything working. If you can't, put the resistor back, try it. You still will see the light, it'll just be very faint. So with that being said, that has been it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. The next videos will get more advanced, and there's a lot of cool stuff that I'm going to be showing you guys how to do with